Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be exploring the 6 recollections.
6 recollections.
And those are a set of Buddhist practices for cultivating mental clarity and well-being.
Yeah.
We are using a combination of teachings and stories from Buddhist texts as our source material.
Okay.
And we're really going to try to figure out how these ancient practices can be helpful in your daily life today.
Yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating about these recollections is, it's one thing to sort of have a concept, a philosophical concept or an idea, but how can we actually apply that to our experience, to our daily lives? And these recollections offer, I think, a really fascinating path to doing that.
Yeah.
Really looking at shifting our attention away from unhelpful states of mind,
right,
and moving it towards more beneficial ones.
Yeah.
And in a way, you can see them as kind of mental training wheels to help us develop greater awareness and control over our thoughts and emotions.
Yeah. And I think especially today, that's so helpful, right?
Absolutely.
We're so busy,
yeah,
and everything's moving so fast, and there's so many negative things that we're exposed to, and we're just bombarded with all this stuff, and we're trying to filter it all, and our brains just aren't meant to handle it, right?
Yeah.
So having these practices to be able to, kind of reset, and kind of get back to a more
skillful way of being.
Yeah, skillful way of being. Yeah, exactly, is really appealing.
Yeah.
But before we even get into the specifics of what they are, I'd like to learn a little bit more about just like the background. Like how did this come about?
Yeah.
What's the history here?
Well, the 6 recollections were actually taught by the Buddha himself in response to a question from one of his followers named Mahanama. Mahanama was seeking guidance on how to best direct his mind, how to use his mind skillfully.
Oh, okay.
And so the Buddha, in response to that question,
shared these 6 specific practices.
So these are really techniques that are meant to help us refine our mental state.
Exactly, yeah. You can think about it this way. Imagine your mind like a garden.
Okay.
And if you're not tending to that garden, if you just kind of leave it to do its own thing, it's going to get overgrown with weeds.
Sure.
With negative thoughts, anxieties, and unhelpful patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And these recollections are like tools for tending that garden.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
To help you clear away the weeds and cultivate a more peaceful and flourishing inner landscape.
I love that. So we're trying to weed our mental garden and make it flourish into something beautiful. Okay. I'm with you. So let's get into the first one. What is it?
Okay, so the first recollection is the recollection of the Buddha.
Okay.
And right away I want to clarify something.
Yeah.
This isn't about worshiping a deity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's not about that. It's about reflecting on the qualities that the Buddha embodies.
Okay.
So qualities like his wisdom, his compassion, and his perfect enlightenment.
So we're trying to kind of embody those qualities within ourselves.
Precisely, yeah. By focusing our attention on these positive attributes, we're essentially setting a positive tone for our own minds.
Okay.
And the text actually compares it to cleansing the head with cosmetics.
Okay.
So you're removing dirt to reveal the radiance underneath.
So we're washing away the grime, so to speak, and revealing our inner Buddha.
You could say that. But I think the real power of this recollection goes beyond simply just feeling good.
Okay.
It's about shifting our perspective.
Okay.
So instead of getting caught up in our own shortcomings, we can choose to focus on an embodiment of ideal qualities.
Okay.
And this mental shift has a ripple effect, bringing us closer to those very qualities we're contemplating. Oh, wow. That's cool. Okay. So it's kind of like, setting our internal compass toward those qualities.
Yeah.
And it's helping us to navigate our thoughts and actions in a more positive direction.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. So what about number 2?
Okay. So the second recollection is the recollection of the Dhamma. Okay. Now, Dhamma, that's a word I hear a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not always sure I really understand it.
Yeah. Well, Dhamma can be understood in a few different ways.
Okay.
Sometimes it can refer to the teachings of the Buddha.
Okay.
Or more broadly, it can refer to truth or the way things are.
So it's kind of like contemplating truth and how truth can guide us.
Yeah, exactly. And connecting to principles and values that bring clarity and purpose to our lives.
Yeah.
It's like having a moral compass to navigate the complexities of life. Yeah. And so this recollection, the recollection of the Dhamma, can really help us in our daily lives because Imagine you're feeling lost, you're feeling uncertain about a decision.
Sure.
And so by reflecting on the Dhamma,
Yeah.
you're essentially tapping into a source of wisdom and guidance.
Right.
You're asking yourself, what is the most skillful way to act in this situation?
Got it.
Or what principles can guide me towards a positive outcome?
Okay.
And even in the text uses the analogy of cleansing the body.
Okay.
So washing away impurities and revealing a state of purity.
So it's kind of like we're aligning ourselves
Yeah.
with a deeper truth,
Exactly.
both internally and with how we interact with the world around us.
Yeah, it's about bringing our actions into harmony
Yeah.
with our understanding of the Dhamma.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. What about number 3?
So the third recollection is the recollection of the Sangha.
Oh, okay. Now, Sangha, that's the monastic community, right?
Yes, traditionally it refers to the monks and nuns, but I think it's important as we're exploring these recollections to think about them in a way that's relevant to our modern lives.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So while it does refer to monks and nuns, I think we can think about Sangha more broadly as any community of support on our path.
So it could be our friends, our family, teachers, mentors, even just a group of like-minded individuals who are kind of inspiring us to grow and learn.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about recognizing the inspiring nature of seeing others dedicated to growth and goodness.
Yeah.
Even if they're not Buddhist monks or nuns.
So it's like we're not alone on this path.
Yes.
We can draw strength and inspiration from others who are also striving for positive change.
Yeah. The text compares it to cleaning clothes.
Okay.
So through the support and inspiration of others, we can remove impurities and stains from the mind.
Oh, I love that. So we're all kind of help each other shine a little brighter.
Exactly, yeah.
I love that. Okay, what's number 4?
Number 4 is the recollection of virtue.
Oh, I like this one already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so important for us to acknowledge our positive qualities,
Yes.
especially in a world that often, focuses on our flaws.
Right.
We're so quick to criticize ourselves and be down on ourselves.
Yeah.
So this is a good one.
Yeah, this recollection encourages us to contemplate our own virtuous actions,
Right.
acts of kindness, generosity, or ethical conduct.
So it's about really just recognizing the good that's within us.
Yes, and seeing those actions as evidence of our inherent potential for goodness.
Oh, okay.
And the text uses a very powerful analogy here, compares it to polishing a mirror.
Okay.
So removing the tarnish to reveal our true shining self.
Oh, I love that. So we're not, our mistakes don't define us. It's really that, our kindness, our compassion, and our capacity for ethical living is really who we are.
Exactly. And the more we reflect on our virtuous actions, the more we strengthen our commitment to living in alignment with those values.
Okay. Okay. I like that. 4 down, 2 to go. What's number 5?
So the 5th recollection is the recollection of generosity.
Generosity. Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Especially in our, kind of consumerist culture.
Yeah.
Where we're constantly being told to buy more, have more, be more.
Yeah.
It's hard to be generous.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can be a real challenge to embrace generosity in a culture that often equates happiness with material possessions.
Yeah.
But this recollection isn't just about material giving.
Okay.
It's about cultivating an attitude of open-handedness.
Oh.
So it's a willingness to share not just our material resources, but also our time, our energy, our kindness.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that true abundance comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give.
And how does that actually look in our daily lives? I mean, I get donating to charity, I get volunteering our time, but what are some more subtle ways that we can kind of practice this?
Yeah, it could be as simple as offering a listening ear to a friend who's going through a tough time,
Okay.
giving someone a genuine compliment,
Yeah.
or even just letting go of the need to be right in an argument.
Right.
It's about shifting our focus
Yeah.
from what we lack to what we can offer to others.
Yeah. So recognizing the abundance that we already have and letting that flow outward.
Exactly. And the text emphasizes that by letting go of our attachment to things,
Okay.
we actually experience a sense of lightness and joy.
It's like we're decluttering our mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great way to put it.
Okay. I like that. All right, so we've made it to the sixth and final recollection.
Yes. This one is the recollection of the devas.
Devas. Now, I'm not familiar with that part.
Okay, yeah. So devas are often translated as deities or celestial beings.
Okay.
But in this context, it's more helpful to think of them as representing higher states of being.
Okay.
So again, we're not talking about worshiping deities, but rather drawing inspiration from these elevated states of consciousness.
Okay, so we're recognizing that we have that potential within us
Yeah.
to embody those qualities,
Yes.
like wisdom, compassion, joy.
Yeah, all of those.
Okay, I like that. So we're setting a high bar for our own growth, basically.
Yes, using the devas as a model for the kind of qualities we aspire to develop.
All right, so I'm starting to see how these 6 recollections all kind of fit together.
Yeah.
We're moving from, contemplating external sources of inspiration, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha,
Yeah.
to really exploring our own inner potential for goodness
Yeah.
through reflecting on our virtues, our generosity, and the qualities of, these higher beings, the devas.
It's a great summary, yeah. And what I think is so fascinating is how they work together to create a kind of upward spiral.
Okay.
So by focusing on these wholesome objects, we're gradually shifting our perspective,
Yeah.
cultivating positive qualities, and moving closer to a state of greater peace and well-being.
Okay, now that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, how do these actually play out in our daily lives?
Yeah.
It sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
But how can we actually apply these
Yeah.
to the challenges and the stresses
Yeah.
that we're faced with every day?
That is where the real magic happens, because these recollections aren't just abstract concepts.
Okay.
They're tools that we can use to navigate real-life situations.
Okay.
And the texts actually offer some really insightful examples
Okay. Yeah, great.
of how to do just that.
I'd love to hear one. Can you share an example?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a story about a monk who was tormented by negative thoughts.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I think we've all been there.
We all have those moments, right, where our mind just gets stuck in a loop of negativity.
Yeah.
And so this monk was experiencing a great deal of mental suffering
Okay.
because of these thoughts. And something really interesting happened.
Okay.
A devata saw his suffering and decided to intervene. Yeah, a devata is kind of like a benevolent spirit.
Oh.
And so this devata saw the monk suffering and wanted to offer some guidance.
Oh, wow. Like a divine intervention.
You could say that, yeah. It's a fascinating detail in the story.
Yeah.
And so this devata gives the monk some really practical advice.
Yeah.
And the advice is, from inappropriate attention, you're being chewed by your thoughts.
Okay.
Relinquishing what's inappropriate, contemplate appropriately.
So basically, hey, you're focusing on the wrong things. Think about something else.
Yeah, exactly. Choose to focus on something more beneficial.
Okay.
And specifically, the devata recommended that the monk practice the 6 recollections.
Okay.
So shifting his attention to these wholesome objects.
Okay.
The Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, his own virtues, his generosity, and the qualities of the devas.
Okay. And did it work?
The story tells us that it did.
Okay.
The monk, by practicing the recollections, was able to transform his mental state. He experienced a sense of joy, rapture, and peace that replaced his previous suffering.
Wow. Okay, so they really can act as an antidote
Yeah,
to those negative thoughts and feelings.
precisely. It highlights how, we have the power to choose where we direct our attention.
Yeah.
We can get caught up in negativity, or we can consciously choose to focus on something more uplifting and beneficial.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing how these can be really helpful.
Okay.
But how often should we be doing these?
Yeah.
Like, is this something that we need to do all day long?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is it depends.
Okay.
There's no hard and fast rule here.
Right.
I think that the key is to find what works best for you.
Okay.
And to make it a regular part of your routine.
So finding those little moments throughout the day
Yeah.
where we can pause and reconnect with these wholesome objects.
Yes, exactly, yeah. It could be during your morning meditation.
Okay.
It could be during your commute. It could be while you're taking a walk in nature.
So like a mental reset button
Yeah.
when we're feeling overwhelmed.
Precisely. And the more we practice, the easier it becomes to shift our attention away from negativity and towards these more wholesome objects. Like
Building a mental muscle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's training our minds
Yeah.
to be more resilient, to respond to challenges with greater peace and clarity.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting it.
Yeah.
I'm still I'm still a little intimidated by all this. Like meditating on these concepts still feels very abstract and kind of out of reach for someone like me.
Yeah.
Who's not, a Buddhist monk living in a cave somewhere.
I understand that hesitation.
Yeah.
It's natural to feel that way when you're first approaching these practices.
Well,
but I want to assure you that it's much simpler than it might seem.
Okay, good.
Could we maybe walk through one to kind of see what it actually looks like to practice?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start with the first one.
Okay, yeah, let's start with the recollection of the Buddha.
Okay.
So this practice involves bringing to mind the qualities of the Buddha.
Okay.
His wisdom, his compassion, his loving kindness, and his perfect enlightenment.
So we're trying to envision those qualities and connect with them on a personal level.
Yeah, exactly. You could reflect on stories of the Buddha's life.
Okay.
You could visualize his image, or you could simply repeat phrases that evoke his qualities.
Okay. Do you have any examples of phrases we could use?
Yeah, you could repeat phrases like, may I be filled with wisdom like the Buddha?
Okay.
Or may I cultivate compassion like the Buddha?
Okay, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's like setting an intention to align ourselves with those positive qualities.
Yeah, and then as we're contemplating them, we should be noticing how it makes us feel.
Yes, exactly. Notice how it affects your mind and body.
Yeah.
Do you feel a sense of peace, joy, inspiration?
Yeah, okay, so that would kind of naturally shift our mental state in a more positive direction.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more readily those qualities will arise within you.
Okay, so it's a gradual process.
Yeah.
Of cultivating these qualities within ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the recollection of the Dhamma?
Yeah, so the recollection of the Dhamma is all about contemplating the teachings of the Buddha, the truth that he revealed about the nature of reality.
So we're connecting with that wisdom and thinking about how it applies to our lives.
Yes, exactly. So, for example, you could contemplate the Four Noble Truths, which outline the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation.
Okay.
Or you could reflect on the Eightfold Path, which offers a framework for ethical living and mental cultivation.
So we're using the teachings as a guide for understanding our own experiences and navigating the challenges of life.
Exactly. And as you contemplate the Dhamma, notice how it affects your thoughts and actions. Do you feel a sense of clarity, purpose, motivation to live in alignment with the teachings?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. It sounds like we're becoming more mindful and intentional about how we live.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the recollection of the Sangha?
Yeah.
I'm especially interested in that one because, like we talked about,
Yeah.
most of us aren't living in a monastic community.
Right.
So how do we practice that?
Yeah, so as we discussed earlier, the Sangha can be understood in a broader sense to include anyone who is dedicated to the path of awakening.
Okay.
So it could be our spiritual teachers, it could be fellow practitioners, it could even be friends and family members who inspire us to grow.
Okay, so it's about recognizing that that importance of community, surrounding ourselves with good influences.
Precisely, yeah. And we can practice this recollection by reflecting on the qualities of those who inspire us.
Okay.
Their kindness, their generosity, their wisdom, their dedication to the path.
It's like we're creating a Sangha.
Yeah.
Even if we don't have a physical community.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And we can also practice this recollection by actively seeking out connections with like-minded individuals.
Okay.
So attending meditation groups, retreats, workshops can be incredibly beneficial.
So building that support.
Yeah.
Both online and offline.
Exactly. And as you contemplate the Sangha, notice how it affects your sense of belonging and connection.
Okay.
Do you feel supported, inspired, encouraged to continue on your path?
Yeah, I can see how that would be really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, what about number 4, the recollection of virtue?
Yeah, so the recollection of virtue encourages us to acknowledge and appreciate our own positive qualities.
I really like this one.
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to, get caught up in self-criticism.
Yeah.
And forget about all the good that we do.
You're right. It's so important to give ourselves credit for our acts of kindness, for our generosity, for our ethical conduct, and any other qualities that we admire in ourselves.
So we're like making a highlight reel of all the good things we've done.
Yeah. Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
But it's not just about feeling good about ourselves. It's also about recognizing that we have the capacity for goodness.
Okay.
Even when we make mistakes.
So it's a form of self-compassion.
Yes.
And recognizing our own inherent worthiness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you contemplate your virtues, notice how it affects your self-perception.
Okay.
Do you feel a sense of pride, self-respect, motivation to continue living in alignment with your values?
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would foster a sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
And encourage us to live more authentically.
Absolutely.
Okay. Number 5, the recollection of generosity.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about how we can practice this,
Yeah.
in a way that goes beyond just, writing a check to a charity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the recollection of generosity is all about cultivating that attitude of open-handedness.
Right.
A willingness to share our time, energy, resources, and kindness with others.
So shifting our focus from what we lack to what we can give.
Precisely.
Okay.
And it could be as simple as offering a listening ear to a friend,
Okay.
giving someone a genuine compliment, or even just, letting go of the need to be right in an argument.
Right.
It's about looking for opportunities to give freely without expecting anything in return.
Okay. And how does that benefit us?
Yeah.
Like, what do we get out of it?
The texts emphasize that generosity leads to a sense of joy and fulfillment
Okay.
and interconnectedness.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And that our happiness is intertwined with the happiness of others.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah.
It seems like generosity is really an antidote to that isolation
Yeah.
that a lot of people feel these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps us to shift from a scarcity mindset to a mindset of abundance.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when we focus on what we lack, it's easy to feel, insecure and afraid.
Yeah.
But when we focus on what we can give, then we tap into that abundance and possibility.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay. And finally, number 6, the recollection of the devas.
Yeah.
This one seems a little more mystical than the others.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, so the recollection of the devas is all about recognizing our own potential for goodness and aligning ourselves with higher states of being.
Okay, so we're recognizing that we have the capacity for these things.
Yeah.
Just like the devas do.
Exactly. It's about setting a high bar for our own personal growth and using the devas as inspiration for the kind of qualities we aspire to cultivate.
Okay.
And we can practice this recollection by reflecting on the stories and myths associated with these beings, seeing them as metaphors for the journey of spiritual awakening.
So even though they might not be literal beings, we can still draw inspiration from their qualities.
Yes, exactly.
And use that to help guide us.
Yes.
Okay.
And as you contemplate the devas, notice how it affects your perspective on life.
Okay.
Do you feel a sense of awe, wonder, a deeper connection to something greater than yourself?
Yeah, okay. That's really interesting. I can see how that could be a really expansive practice
Yeah.
and help us to get out of our own little heads,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was all 6.
Yes.
I guess the big question is, how do we make this a regular practice?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize that there's no right or wrong way to practice these recollections.
Okay.
The most important thing is to find what resonates with you
Right.
and to make it a regular part of your daily life.
So it's like we've been given this toolkit,
Yeah,
and now it's up to us to figure out which tools work best for us.
exactly. And just like any skill, the more we practice, the more proficient we become.
Okay, so it's an ongoing process
Yeah.
of learning and experimenting. Finding what works for us
Yeah,
and adapting our practice as we go.
absolutely.
Wow. This has been such a fascinating deep dive into these 6 recollections.
Yeah.
It really feels like these practices offer a really practical path
Yeah.
for navigating life and just dealing with all the challenges that we face in the modern world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they provide a really useful framework for shifting our perspective, training our minds,
Right.
and cultivating those qualities that lead to greater happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about how they can be helpful, but do you have any tips or suggestions
Yeah.
for how to actually make this a part of our lives?
Yeah, I think one approach is to choose one recollection that particularly resonates with you.
Okay.
And maybe make that a focus for a few minutes each day. So
Okay.
it could be during your morning meditation, on your commute, or even during a walk in nature.
So just finding those little pockets of time.
Yeah, exactly. Even just a few minutes
Yeah.
of focused contemplation can have a significant impact.
Okay.
You can also try integrating the recollections into your daily activities. So, for example, you could bring to mind the recollection of generosity while you're doing volunteer work,
Right.
or the recollection of virtue while engaging in acts of kindness.
So we're kind of infusing our actions with the spirit of these recollections.
Precisely, yeah. It's about bringing mindfulness and intention to everything we do.
Okay, like that.
Another helpful tip is to use reminders throughout the day.
Okay.
So you could set an alarm on your phone, post sticky notes in your workspace,
Right.
or use mala beads to count your repetitions.
So we're creating an environment that supports our practice.
Exactly, yeah. And I
Right.
think, we've talked about a lot of different ways to incorporate these practices, whether it's through formal meditation, informal reflection, or just bringing a greater awareness to our daily activities.
Right.
The key is to experiment
Yeah.
and find what works best for you.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I think it would be helpful to just do a quick recap of each one.
Yeah, great idea.
Just so we can really, solidify everything and give our listeners something to take away with them.
Absolutely. Let's revisit each one and distill its essence.
Perfect. So starting with the recollection of the Buddha.
Yeah, so the recollection of the Buddha is all about connecting with the qualities of the Buddha, his wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, and perfect enlightenment. And by reflecting on these qualities, we inspire and uplift ourselves, cultivating a more positive and peaceful state of mind.
Wonderful. Okay. And the recollection of the Dhamma.
Yeah, so the recollection of the Dhamma is about contemplating the teachings of the Buddha,
Okay.
the truths that he revealed about the nature of reality and the path to liberation.
Right.
And by reflecting on these teachings, we can gain clarity and understanding
Yeah.
and find guidance and inspiration for our lives.
Okay. Now the recollection of the Sangha.
The recollection of the Sangha is about recognizing the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive influences,
Okay.
people who uplift us and support us on our journey.
Right.
And by connecting with like-minded individuals, we cultivate a sense of belonging, purpose, and shared aspiration.
Okay. And the recollection of virtue.
So the recollection of virtue is all about acknowledging our own positive qualities, our acts of kindness, generosity, ethical conduct,
Right.
and any other attributes that we admire in ourselves.
Okay.
And by reflecting on these virtues, we cultivate self-esteem, self-compassion, and a sense of authenticity.
Okay. And the recollection of generosity.
The recollection of generosity is all about cultivating that attitude of open-handedness,
Right.
a willingness to share our time, energy, resources, and kindness with others.
Yeah.
And by practicing generosity, we can experience joy, fulfillment, and a sense of interconnectedness.
Wonderful. And finally, the recollection of the Devas.
Yeah, so the recollection of the Devas is about recognizing our own potential for goodness and aligning ourselves with higher states of being.
Okay.
And by reflecting on the qualities that the Devas represent, we expand our perspective on life and tap into a sense of awe and wonder.
Wow. That was a great recap.
Yeah,
I think our listeners are well equipped now
I hope so.
to start exploring these practices.
Yeah, I agree. And remember, there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Right.
The most important thing is to approach these practices with an open mind
Right.
and a willingness to experiment.
Great. Well, to our listeners, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Which recollection resonates most with you?
Yeah.
How do you plan to incorporate these practices into your daily life?
Yeah. Share your thoughts and experiences with us.
We're excited to continue this exploration with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the 6 recollections.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Until next time, happy recollecting. All right, so we're back for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at Meditator's Tools. It's a collection of Buddhist teachings. And I find it really interesting how this stuff, even though it's ancient, still applies to our crazy world today.
Yeah, definitely. And what we're really going to be digging into is, the idea of like a developed mind from these teachings. How can we actually use those ideas in our everyday lives,
Exactly right. And right away, the text talks about how easy it is for like our emotions to kind of take control of our actions. Like think about it. You're super happy or like really angry and suddenly you're not exactly thinking straight.
Yeah, like we're puppets to our feelings, And the Buddha in section 17, he actually talks about this, contrasting an undeveloped mind to a developed mind, right? And the developed mind, it's not swept away by those feelings. It just observes them, doesn't let them control its actions.
So it's not about ignoring your emotions. It's more like not letting them run the show.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you're inside a really strong house during a storm. You see the wind, the rain, but you're safe inside, right?
That's a great analogy. Though I gotta say, the way the Buddha got to that level of mental strength was pretty intense. Like, he experimented with, hardcore meditation, breath control. He even, almost starved himself.
Oh, yeah, no. I need my coffee in the morning or I'm useless. I can't imagine trying that stuff, while I'm stuck in traffic,
Right, but the point is, even all that discomfort couldn't shake his inner peace. It shows the power of really training your mind,
Okay, but how do we actually do that? We're not monks. We've got jobs and responsibilities and distractions everywhere. Where do we even begin?
Well, the text actually gives some surprisingly practical advice. There's a part where this senior nun, Mahapajapati Gautami, she asks the Buddha for teachings that are easy to understand and use.
Did he give her some secret meditation trick? The kind you can only learn in a cave on a mountaintop.
Nope, not at all. In section 18, he tells her to really pay attention to her actions and thoughts. Figure out which ones lead to peace and which lead to, suffering.
So it's about building self-awareness, huh? Almost like taking stock of what you normally do, how you react. Does it usually make you feel better or worse?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the text says, figuring out what qualities lead to passion, not to dispassion, to being fettered, not to being unfettered, right? And the opposite, what helps you feel free.
It's funny how this ancient advice kind of lines up with what we know now from psychology, like recognizing when you're thinking negatively and then choosing a different way to respond.
Oh, for sure. And it goes beyond just thinking about yourself. It's also about how your words and actions affect other people, like mindful communication, you know?
You're thinking about that story with the baby who's got something dangerous in its mouth, right?
Yeah. Section 20, the Buddha uses that to explain how important it is to choose your words carefully. You wouldn't want to hurt the baby more while you're taking the dangerous thing out. Our communication should be like that. It should build understanding and not cause more pain.
That's such a clear image it makes you think. Like before we react in the moment, before we send that angry email, are our words actually helping or just making things worse?
Exactly. It's about having that awareness that the teachings talk about, bringing that same care and attention to everything we do, even just talking to people.
Yeah, I think most of us could use a bit more peace and mindfulness when we communicate. Especially these days, it feels like everyone's kind of on edge,
Definitely. And it's a practice. You're not going to get it perfect every time. But even little changes in how we communicate can make a big difference, make our relationships better, make our work a bit more harmonious,
Yeah, it really is something, how changing your mindset even a little bit or how you talk to people, it can actually make a difference. But the text, it also talks about these people, these monks who really lived these teachings, right? Like in the 𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙞𝙀.
Yeah, their stories, they're really interesting. And they really show you that these practices, they can actually change how you see the world,
Okay, so who comes to mind? Who's a good example?
Well, there's Sapadasa, section 26. It describes his journey to finding peace. And it was a long one. It was hard. Imagine struggling with your emotions for 25 years. He was so messed up that he even thought about, ending it all.
25 years. Wow. That's longer than some people even live.
Yeah.
To deal with that kind of turmoil for that long.
He talks about being racked with lust, he couldn't find any peace inside himself. Really paints a picture of how much he was suffering,
But then something changed, right?
Yeah.
What happened?
Right when he was about to give up, he had this moment of apt attention, the text calls it. It's like a sudden realization, He sees how pointless his despair is, and in that moment, his suffering just lifts, gone.
It's amazing how one moment of clarity can just change your whole path, Makes you think how much of our suffering is all in our heads.
For sure. And Sapadasa, his story shows how powerful it can be to keep going, to keep looking inside yourself, even when it's hard.
Okay, that's powerful stuff. What about someone else?
Yeah.
Anyone else stand out?
Oh, yeah, there's Adhimutta. His situation was different, but just as tough.
Oh, okay, I'm curious. What happened to him?
So he's walking in the forest, and this group of bandits, they come up to him, and they're bragging, about all the people they've killed, how everyone's scared of them. You'd think he'd be terrified, right?
I'd be freaking out. What did he do?
He didn't even flinch.
Mm-hmm.
Section 27, it says the bandits were totally confused. Why isn't he scared? They even asked him, why don't you lament in the face of what's greatly to be feared?
How do you even stay calm in a situation like that? What was his secret?
Ātthimutta, he explained that he was free from, like, craving, from attachment, death. It was just a natural thing to him, not something to fear.
It's hard to wrap your head around, especially when someone's threatening to kill you, you know?
He compared his body to a carcass. Like, it was something separate from him, not important. He told them, do as you like with this carcass. From that, I will feel neither hatred nor love.
Wow. It's like he was saying, you can't hurt me. I've already let go of everything.
Exactly. And you know what? His words, they actually got to the bandits. Some of them, they were so moved, they gave up their criminal lives and became monks themselves.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It shows you how when you live these teachings, it affects everyone around you. It's not just about you changing, it's about the whole world.
These stories, they're so inspiring because they show you that anyone can develop this amazing mental strength. It takes work, sure, but the potential is there in all of us.
So looking at these monks, what can we learn from them? How do we take those lessons and use them in our own lives?
Their lives, they really show the power of a developed mind, that inner strength and clarity to deal with whatever life throws at you, you know?
But like, how do we actually do that? It's easy to get lost in the everyday stuff and forget about those bigger goals.
Well, the text actually gives some hints. Remember Mahakassapa, the monk who lived a super simple life.
Yeah. What about him?
So section 28, it says that the Buddha actually suggested to him, hey, maybe you should take it a bit easier, especially since you're getting older. He offered him nicer places to stay, better food, all that.
I mean, who would say no to that? Little comfort never hurt anyone, right?
But Mahakassapa, he said no thanks. He felt like his simple way of living, it was important not just for him, but to show future generations how it's done.
So it was about more than just his own practice. He wanted to leave a legacy, you know?
Exactly. And the Buddha, he respected that. He even praised him for practicing for the happiness of many out of compassion for the world.
That's a good reminder that there's not just one way to use these teachings. It's about finding what works for you and using that to help others.
It's about recognizing that there are many paths to awakening and respecting everyone's journey, you know. We can find inspiration in these stories, but in the end, our practice is our own.
So we've seen these amazing stories, these monks, you know, really living these teachings. How do we actually do it? You know, how do we take this ancient stuff and make it work in our lives today?
Right. That's the big question, isn't it? It's not about becoming a monk or anything like that. It's about figuring out how to actually use these practices like in our everyday lives.
So where do we even begin? What's like a good first step, you know, for someone who wants to build that, a developed mind?
Well, the text, it actually gives us some clues. Remember how much the Buddha talked about mindful communication?
Yeah.
Like that story with the baby and the dangerous thing in its mouth?
Oh, yeah, right. He said talking should be like taking out that dangerous thing, but without hurting the baby more. It really shows you how powerful words can be, you know?
It's a good reminder, especially these days when everyone's like so quick to react online, you know? So one thing you can try is just paying more attention to the words you use, especially when things are tough.
So like before you lash out, before you send that angry email, you stop and think, are my words going to make this better or worse?
Exactly. It's like hitting pause before you do something you might regret later.
Oh, yeah, I think we've all been there. It's so easy to just react in the moment, you know, let your emotions take over.
And another good tip, it comes from that story with Mahapajapeka Gautami, remember? The Buddha tells her to pay close attention to what makes her feel peaceful and what makes her suffer.
It's like taking a look at your own habits, your own reactions, right? Does what you normally do, does it usually make you feel good or bad?
Exactly. Maybe take a few minutes each day to just think about your day. What habits make you feel good? Which ones lead to trouble?
That kind of self-reflection, it can really change things. You know, it helps you see what you're choosing and how those choices are affecting you.
And hey, remember those amazing monks we talked about? The ones who overcame all that hardship and built such incredible mental strength?
Yeah. Their stories were so inspiring. They showed us what's really possible with these teachings.
What if you sought out more stories like that, you know? Not just from Buddhist teachings, but from anywhere. Reading about people who have faced challenges and thrived, it can really give you motivation.
It reminds you that you're not alone, right? There are so many people who have found ways to be strong, to be kind, to find peace, even when things are hard.
And you never know, maybe someday your own story will inspire someone else. We all have that potential, you know, to live these teachings and make the world a better place.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into a meditator's tools. It's been amazing to see how these ancient teachings can actually help us with the stuff we face every day.
And remember, developing your mind, it's a journey, not a destination. It's about making those small efforts every day to be more aware, to be wiser, to be kinder.
And like we saw with those stories, that journey, it can really change everything, not just for you, but for everyone around you.
So keep learning, keep practicing, keep sharing what you learn. We all have the power to master our minds and make the world a more peaceful place.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring. Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle something a listener specifically requested: mindfulness of in and out breathing.
Oh, very nice.
You've given us excerpts from a meditator's tools and some sections from Buddhist texts.
Right.
So let's explore how to actually apply these ancient teachings to, like, our modern lives.
Oh, I love that. It's fascinating how these texts offer a really practical, like, step-by-step approach to mindfulness. It's like they've laid out a roadmap for us to follow. You know?
Exactly. So if we look at section 30, it describes mindfulness of in and out breathing as a meditation practice where you focus on, well, your breath. Seems simple enough, right?
Yeah, the simplicity is key. It's about using something we're already doing, breathing as like an anchor for our attention.
Yeah.
You don't need any special equipment or skills, you know? You just need to be present with each inhale and exhale.
Okay, that makes sense. But section 29 mentions 5 qualities that make this practice easier, and some of them sound a bit intense. Yeah. It talks about being a person of few duties, eating lightly, embracing wakefulness, being learned in beneficial teachings, and finding a secluded space.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I can't exactly drop everything and become a hermit scholar.
I hear ya. It sounds like you need to move into a cave and live off berries.
Yeah.
But remember, these texts were written centuries ago in a very different context.
Right.
What's important is understanding the principles behind these qualities.
So it's not about literally becoming a recluse.
Right.
It's about minimizing distractions.
Precisely. These qualities point to the importance of creating a conducive environment for practice.
Right.
Think of it like this. You wouldn't try to have a serious conversation in a noisy nightclub, right?
Yeah.
You'd find a quiet space where you could really focus and listen.
Yeah.
It's the same with meditation.
Okay.
By minimizing distractions and cultivating inner stillness, we create the space for deep listening, not just to others, but to ourselves.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So how did those 16 steps of breath meditation fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Section 30 goes into a lot of detail about them. And I have to admit, it feels a bit overwhelming.
It's true. 16 steps can seem like a lot.
Yeah.
But they're not meant to be tackled all at once.
Okay.
Think of it as a gradual progression.
Okay.
The first step, as we discussed, is simply becoming aware of the breath.
Right.
Noticing whether it's long or short, deep or shallow.
Right. And then as you progress through the steps, it becomes about more than just the physical sensations of breathing.
Exactly. As your awareness deepens, you begin to notice the feelings that arise in connection with the breath. Maybe a sense of calmness, ease, or even restlessness.
Right.
Eventually, your attention expands to encompass the mind itself, the thoughts, perceptions, and intentions that are constantly flowing.
Wow. So it's like the breath becomes a doorway to deeper self-awareness.
Yeah.
Is there a particular step in this progression that you find particularly powerful?
You know, for me, the step that focuses on relinquishing is incredibly profound.
Okay.
It's the 10th step, and it challenges us to let go of our clinging, our desire to control our experience.
So instead of trying to force ourselves to feel calm or relaxed, we just observe what's happening without judgment.
Precisely. It's about allowing each inhalation and exhalation to arise and pass away naturally without grasping or resisting.
Right.
And as we do this, we start to cultivate a deep sense of peace and freedom.
Yeah.
That freedom is really the essence of this entire practice.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. Now, how does this all connect to the 4 establishments of mindfulness?
Right.
Section 30 mentions those, but I'm not sure how they fit into the picture.
The 4 establishments of mindfulness provide a framework for applying this breath awareness to every aspect of our lives.
Okay.
They're like 4 lenses through which we can view our experience with greater clarity.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
Okay. The first is mindfulness of the body. This is where breath awareness comes in.
Right.
By paying attention to the sensations of breathing, we're cultivating a direct experience of our physical embodiment. This can help us become more attuned to our physical needs and sensations, and ultimately feel more at home in our own bodies.
And then there's mindfulness of feelings, right?
Exactly. As you become more sensitive to subtle sensations, you begin to notice the feelings that are always present. pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
Right.
By observing these feelings with mindful awareness, you gain a deeper understanding of their impermanent nature.
Yeah.
They arise, they linger, and then they pass away.
Right.
This understanding helps you avoid getting swept away by strong emotions.
So instead of being controlled by our emotions, we learn to observe them with a sense of detachment.
Precisely. And this detachment, or rather this non-reactivity, brings us to the third establishment,
Right.
mindfulness of the mind. This involves becoming aware of the thoughts, perceptions, and intentions that are constantly arising and passing away.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily facts or truths.
So it's like we're developing a mental muscle. The ability to step back and observe our thoughts without getting caught up in them.
Exactly. And the final establishment, mindfulness of mental qualities, builds on this awareness.
Right.
It encourages us to observe the qualities of our experience itself: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self.
Whoa. Okay. Those sound pretty deep. Can you elaborate on those a bit?
Of course. Impermanence simply means that everything is constantly changing.
Right.
Nothing stays the same forever.
Yeah.
Unsatisfactoriness refers to the fact that we often crave things that don't bring lasting happiness.
Right.
And we push away things that we think will bring us pain.
Right.
And non-self points to the idea that there is no fixed, unchanging self.
Yeah.
We're a collection of constantly changing physical and mental processes.
There's a lot to take in. So
Yeah.
basically, by developing mindfulness through breath meditation, we're not just learning to relax, we're gaining profound insights into the nature of reality.
You got it. And this is where the real magic happens.
Yeah.
These insights, if cultivated over time, can lead to what the Buddhists call the 7 factors of awakening.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about these 7 factors of awakening.
Well, let's dive into those after a quick break.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back.
So these 7 factors of awakening are essentially qualities we cultivate through mindfulness practice that lead to greater freedom and well-being.
Okay, that sounds pretty amazing. But what are they exactly?
They are mindfulness investigation of phenomena energy rapture, or joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity.
Wow, that's quite a list. It sounds like a recipe for a truly awesome life. But how do these factors actually play out in our everyday experience?
Well, mindfulness, as we've been discussing, is the foundation. It's about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Right.
Investigation of phenomena encourages us to look deeply into the nature of our experience, to explore our thoughts, feelings, and sensations with curiosity and openness.
So it's not just about being aware, it's about actively exploring and understanding our inner world. Exactly. And as we do this, a natural sense of energy arises. This isn't about hyperactivity, but rather a feeling of aliveness and enthusiasm for life.
Right.
This energy, in turn, can lead to feelings of rapture or joy, a deep sense of contentment and well-being.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these factors build upon each other. So what about tranquility and concentration?
Tranquility refers to a state of inner peace and stillness. It's the ability to remain calm and centered even amidst the ups and downs of life. And concentration is the ability to focus our attention on a single object, whether it's the breath, a mantra, or a particular task.
So it's like we're training our minds to become more focused and less reactive.
Precisely. And finally, we have equanimity. This is a state of balance and acceptance. The ability to meet all experiences with an open heart without clinging to the pleasant or pushing away the unpleasant.
Wow, equanimity sounds like a superpower. So basically, these 7 factors of awakening are like a roadmap to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
You could say that. By cultivating these qualities through practices like breath meditation, we gradually free ourselves from suffering and awaken to our true potential.
Okay, I'm totally on board with this idea of awakening. But let's bring it back down to earth for a moment. Section 32 of the Buddhist text talks about more immediate benefits of breath meditation, like reduced fatigue, mental clarity, and overcoming negative thoughts. It's not all about reaching enlightenment, right? This practice can actually help us deal with the everyday stresses and challenges we all face.
Absolutely. Those benefits are very real and tangible. In fact, they're often what initially draws people to mindfulness practice.
So it's like we get a taste of the good stuff up front, which motivates us to keep going.
Exactly. And as you continue to practice these benefits deepen and expand, you might find yourself becoming more patient, more compassionate, not only towards yourself, but also towards others.
That's incredible. It sounds like a win-win situation. But before we get too carried away, I want to bring up a point from section 33. It tells a story about some monks who became overwhelmed with the practice and started engaging in extreme behaviors like holding their breath for extended periods of time.
That's a valuable reminder that even with something as beneficial as breath meditation, balance and skillful application are key. It's not about pushing ourselves to the limit or striving for some idealized state. It's about finding a sustainable approach that integrates mindfulness into our lives in a way that feels nourishing and supportive.
So more about gentle persistence than forceful effort.
Exactly. And this is where guidance from experienced teachers can be invaluable. They can help you tailor your practice to your individual needs and provide support along the way.
That makes sense. It's like having a personal trainer for your mind.
Yeah.
So if someone is listening to this and feeling inspired to start incorporating breath meditation into their life, where should they begin?
The best place to start is simply by finding a comfortable posture, either sitting or lying down, and bringing your attention to your breath.
Okay.
Notice the sensation of the breath entering and leaving your nostrils or the rise and fall of your abdomen. Start with just a few minutes each day and gradually increase the duration as you feel comfortable.
Okay, that sounds doable. But what if my mind starts to wander, which, let's be honest, it inevitably will?
That's perfectly normal. It's what minds do. The key is to simply notice when it has wandered and gently guide it back to the breath. Don't judge yourself or get frustrated. Just start again.
So it's like a mental workout, strengthening our ability to focus and be present.
Exactly. And like any workout, consistency is key. Even a few minutes of mindful breathing each day can make a difference.
Any suggestions for fitting into a busy schedule?
You can try practicing first thing in the morning to set a calm tone for the day, or in the evening to unwind before bed. You can also incorporate mindful breathing into everyday activities like waiting in line, washing dishes, or walking.
So it's not just about formal meditation sessions. It's about integrating this awareness into our daily lives.
Precisely. The ultimate goal is to cultivate a state of mindfulness that permeates every aspect of your being.
Speaking of everyday life, how can we use breath meditation to deal with the inevitable stresses and challenges we all face?
When you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, pause for a moment and bring your attention to your breath.
Right.
Notice the sensation of each inhale and exhale. As you do this, you'll naturally start to calm down and create some space between yourself and your reactions.
So it's like hitting the pause button on autopilot. Instead of reacting impulsively, we give ourselves a moment to respond with more awareness and clarity.
You got it. Breath meditation provides a powerful tool for navigating the ups and downs of life with greater skill and ease. It's like having a built-in stress reliever that you can access anytime, anywhere.
This is all starting to make sense.
Yeah.
But how can we take this practice even deeper? What are some ways to move beyond basic breath awareness?
As you become more comfortable with basic breath awareness, you can start to explore some of the more advanced techniques we discussed earlier, like focusing on the qualities of the breath, its impermanence, its lightness, its spaciousness. This can lead to profound insights into the nature of reality.
That sounds fascinating. But I imagine it takes quite a bit of practice to reach that level of awareness.
It does, but the journey itself is incredibly rewarding. Remember, the key is to approach the practice with patience, curiosity, and a willingness to learn.
And to not beat ourselves up when our minds inevitably wander.
Absolutely. Mindfulness is a practice, not a performance. There's no need for perfection. Just show up with an open heart and a willingness to be present with your experience, whatever that may be.
That's a really encouraging message. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the ancient teachings on breath meditation, its profound benefits, and how to actually apply it in our daily lives. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question to ponder.
I love where this is going.
Now that you've explored the depths of breath meditation and its practical applications, what subtle shifts in attention might you notice as you go about your day?
That's a great question to contemplate. Maybe you'll find yourself becoming more aware of the sensations of your body as you move. Or perhaps you'll notice the rise and fall of emotions with more clarity.
Or maybe you'll find yourself pausing more often to appreciate the simple beauty of the present moment.
Exactly. The possibilities are endless. And remember, the journey to greater awareness and peace is an ongoing process. It starts with a single breath.
Beautifully said. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We encourage you to continue exploring these teachings and to discover for yourselves the transformative power of breath meditation. Thanks for joining us. Before we go, I'm curious about something. Like we talked about the monks who push things too far. We've also talked about creating like a sustainable practice.
Right.
How can our listener know if they're on the right track?
Right.
How do we balance that enthusiasm with, not holding our breath for an hour?
That's such an important question.
Yeah.
And it highlights a key principle in mindfulness.
Okay.
Self-compassion.
Okay.
This practice isn't about striving for perfection or pushing ourselves to the limit.
Yeah.
It's about being kind to ourselves, honoring our limitations, and recognizing that we're all works in progress.
So it's okay if my mind wanders 1,000 times during a 5-minute meditation.
Absolutely. In fact, noticing that your mind has wandered is a sign of mindfulness.
Wow.
It means you're paying attention.
Okay.
The key is to gently guide your attention back to the breath without judgment.
That takes the pressure off. It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be human.
Exactly. And remember, this is a practice, not a performance. There's no need to compare ourselves to others or strive for some idealized state.
Right.
The most important thing is to simply show up with an open heart and a willingness to be present with your experience, whatever that may be.
I love that. Show up with an open heart.
Yeah.
So if our listener is feeling inspired to create a daily practice, where should they start?
A good starting point is to choose a time of day that works best for you.
Okay.
Some people find it helpful to practice first thing in the morning to set a calm and focused tone for the day.
Okay.
Others prefer to meditate in the evening to unwind before bed.
Right.
Experiment and see what feels most natural for you.
Okay. So pick a time and stick to it.
Consistency is key.
Right.
Even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes each day, make a commitment to yourself and show up for your practice.
And what about creating a dedicated space? Does it need to be something elaborate like a meditation room with candles and incense?
Not at all. Find a quiet spot in your home where you can sit or lie down comfortably.
Okay.
It could be a corner of your bedroom, a cozy chair, or even a spot in your garden.
Yeah.
The important thing is that it feels peaceful and inviting to you.
So it's more about creating a sense of intentionality than having the perfect setup.
Precisely. And remember, you don't need any special equipment.
No.
Just your breath and your willingness to be present.
That's great. So let's recap. We've talked about choosing a time, creating a space, and being consistent with our practice.
Right.
Any other tips for our listener as they embark on this journey?
One thing that can be incredibly helpful is to find a teacher or a community to support you in your practice. There are many wonderful meditation centers and online resources available.
It's like having a guide and a cheering section to keep you motivated.
Exactly. And remember, the journey to greater awareness and peace is an ongoing process.
Right.
There will be moments of ease and moments of challenge.
Yeah.
But the more we practice, the more we cultivate the qualities of mindfulness, compassion, and resilience that can help us navigate the ups and downs of life with greater skill and grace.
Beautifully said. Well, folks, we've reached the end of our deep dive into mindfulness of in and out breathing. We hope you found this exploration insightful and inspiring.
Yeah.
Remember, the journey starts with a single breath. Diving in again, folks. Ready for another deep dive? This one is all about, get this, mindfulness immersed in the body.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, right. We've been digging into some Buddhist texts. They really go deep on this practice.
Okay.
And, well, some of the stuff they claim can happen, let's just say it sounds pretty wild.
Really? Like, what kind of stuff?
Well, we'll get to that. But first,
Okay.
what even is this mindfulness in the body thing? Is it just like normal mindfulness, but more physical?
It's definitely related to mindfulness, but instead of that, empty your mind thing, a lot of folks try to do this, is more about, well, the texts encourage us to really inhabit our physical experience in a way most people, just don't.
So instead of spacing out during our day,
Right.
we're bringing super awareness to every little ache, pain, itch, even just walking or standing. That sounds honestly kind of exhausting.
It can be a shift for sure, because with regular meditation, you're often trying for that stillness of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here it's about bringing that same clear observation, but to every single bodily action. It's like instead of being on autopilot, you're suddenly really engaged with each movement, each sensation.
Okay, so it's more about being present all the time, not just during meditation?
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's this image in the text about examining a sack of grain.
A sack of grain? Okay.
Right. Instead of just seeing grain, they're meticulously identifying each type: wheat, rice, beans, you name it. It's that level of close attention, but applied to what's happening in our bodies.
All right, I'm starting to get the picture, but honestly, it sounds both incredible and really hard. What would someone even do to start practicing this? Concrete steps.
So the texts actually lay out 4 main techniques. First one is probably the most familiar, focusing on the breath.
Oh, right. That's Meditation 101.
Yeah. Paying close attention to each inhale, each exhale, all those sensations.
Okay, that makes sense. What are the other 3?
So the second one is all about noting your postures and actions really carefully. When you're walking, you're not just walking, you're aware of the weight shifting, how your legs move, even the feeling of your clothes brushing against you.
So no more zoning out while scrolling on our phones in line at the store, huh?
Ideally, no. The point is to break those patterns of not paying attention. Now, the third technique is where things get a little more intense.
Intense how? Like physically demanding?
Not exactly. It involves contemplating your body's composition in detail.
Like anatomy?
More than that, we're talking head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, all your internal organs, kidneys, heart, intestines, even, bodily fluids.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to take in. Why focus on that stuff? It seems kind of unpleasant.
It's meant to challenge how we usually see the body by recognizing it's not this solid, unchanging thing, but all these parts, always changing. It helps us detach from it, see it for what it really is.
I think I see where you're going with this. It's like recognizing impermanence, right? Big theme in Buddhism.
Exactly. And it gets even more vivid. There's this whole section about a corpse.
A corpse?
Yeah, like a decomposing one. And the idea is to apply that image to our bodies, to really grasp that this body too, this is its nature, this is its future, there's no avoiding it.
Okay, I get the impermanence tie-in, but wow, that's heavy stuff. So tell me about this fourth technique. Is it more of the same?
This one's about analyzing the body in terms of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. They use this analogy of a butcher breaking down a cow to show what they mean.
Wait, a butcher?
It's not as gruesome as it sounds. The point is seeing your body stripped bare without all the ideas we layer onto it. Earth is like our bones, water our fluids, fire the heat, wind our breath.
Okay, so less about actual butchery, more about seeing the basic building blocks. These texts sure use some wild imagery, but what's the point of all this contemplation? Is it just to, accept we're going to die someday?
It's not meant to be morbid. It's about developing equanimity. You acknowledge the impermanence, and it frees you from clinging to the body as your permanent self.
I see. So instead of being so attached to our physical form, we can see it as it is, always changing, ultimately not lasting forever. And that leads to all these benefits you mentioned.
You got it. That shift in perspective is where things start to get interesting.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What exactly are these benefits? We're talking like enlightenment or something even more out there?
It's not just enlightenment, though. That's definitely on the table. The text lays out all the benefits. Some are kind of immediate, like you start to gain mastery over your emotions.
Mastery. Like you never get angry or sad again.
Not quite. It's more that fear, anxiety, even just displeasure, it doesn't have that same hold on you.
So it's not about getting rid of emotions, but not being controlled by them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's observing them, but not getting swept away. And it's not just emotional stuff either. You supposedly get physically tougher to heat, cold, hunger, thirst, even pain. It all bothers you less.
Wait, hold on. Less bothered by pain? How's that even work?
It's kind of wild, right? They don't totally explain the mechanism, but it's because you're so aware of your body, you relate to these sensations differently. Instead of that automatic, this is bad, resist it reaction, you can just observe it, and that lessens its grip on you.
Okay, so not pain-free, but changing how we experience it. I can kind of see that. But you were saying earlier about benefits that are even more than that, almost like superpowers.
Yeah. This is where it gets really interesting. So one of the things this practice is supposed to lead to is attaining the jhanas.
Jhanas, you said that word before. What was it again?
Think of them like levels of super deep meditative absorption, incredible concentration, bliss that's way beyond anything we usually feel. And these jhanas, they're like the gateway to even wilder abilities.
Okay, now we're talking superpowers. Give me some examples. What could you supposedly do?
Well, they talk about being able to appear and disappear at will, walking through walls, thus legitating, even touching the sun and moon with your hand.
Whoa, we went from mindful breathing to cosmic powers pretty fast. Are we supposed to take all this literally?
Good question, and one that's been debated for a long time. Some folks say it's all symbolic, walking through walls isn't about actually phasing through matter, but more what you're mentally free, not limited by usual beliefs.
So not teleporting, but maybe a sense of possibility, of not being boxed in.
Exactly, and even if we set those more fantastical claims aside, there's still some pretty wild mental stuff, like developing divine hearing, being able to perceive sounds from super far away, and then there's reading minds, seeing people's past lives.
Okay, now that is getting into some woo-woo territory. Is there any, scientific proof for any of this?
Most scientists are pretty skeptical, obviously, but there is more and more research coming out about mindfulness, meditation, and how it can really change the brain. Maybe with enough practice, we tap into ways of being aware that we don't even have the science to understand yet.
So not ruling it out entirely, but even just the more down-to-earth benefits? like being less reactive to stuff, that sounds like it takes serious dedication. What are some of the roadblocks people hit when trying to develop this kind of mindfulness?
The text actually talks about that a lot. They knew it wasn't easy. One of the first things they say is you got to find a quiet place to practice. Go to the wilderness, sit under a tree, even find an empty building.
So it's about creating a space free from distractions, right? Makes sense. But not everyone can just run off to a forest retreat every time they want to meditate. What about people in busy cities with jobs and families and all that? How do you find that quiet amidst the chaos?
You're right, it's not always easy, but the text also says the real sanctuary is the one you build inside. It's about finding that inner stillness, no matter where you are, what's going on around you.
So it's a skill, like you could be on a noisy subway, but still have that inner peace through focusing on the breath, the body.
Exactly, it becomes portable, you can take it anywhere, but of course, even with good intentions, distractions happen. They use this really cool analogy to describe it.
Oh, I love a good analogy. Lay it on me.
So picture this, you're at a huge festival, there's this famous beauty queen in the middle, everyone's watching her sing and dance, and you are given a bowl filled to the brim with oil and told to carry it through this massive crowd right between the beauty queen and the audience.
That sounds nerve-wracking. I'd be terrified of spilling. What's the catch?
Oh, there's a catch, all right. A guy with a sword follows right behind you, and if you spill even one drop, he chops your head off.
Yikes. Talk about pressure. I wouldn't be able to focus on anything but that bowl.
Exactly. So the bowl is mindfulness, and that whole crazy crowd, all those distractions, that's everything trying to pull you away from your practice.
So it's about that laser focus, even when things are chaotic, even when it feels kind of dangerous. But in real life, we're not usually dodging swords when we meditate. What are some more everyday challenges?
Well, they warn about Mara gaining entry.
Mara? Is that like a demon or something?
Not a literal being, more like a representation of all the forces that mess with your spiritual progress. Temptation, doubt, clinging to desires, those voices that say you're not good enough. It's all Mara.
So like when your phone buzzes during meditation or you start thinking about your to-do list, those are like modern-day Maras.
Exactly. They're everywhere, even inside us. But the text does offer ways to deal with them. It's all about restraint.
Restraint, like just having willpower?
It's deeper than that. They have this wild image. 6 animals tied together, a snake, crocodile, bird, dog, hyena, and a monkey, all pulling in different directions.
Whoa, that's a lot of animals. What do they represent?
Our senses. Always wanting something, pulling us towards pleasure, distraction. When your mindfulness is weak, these animals run wild. But when it's strong, it's like a sturdy post, holding them all together.
So not denying our desires, but training them so they work with our intentions. Mindfulness is the anchor that keeps us from getting pulled all over the place.
Perfect. And that brings us to an interesting point. The text acknowledges there are different paths to this mastery. They lay out 4 modes of practice, recognizing that what works for one person might not for another.
So with personalized mindfulness, tell me about these 4 modes.
They're about whether the practice feels painful or pleasant, and whether it leads to slow or quick intuition.
Okay, but some paths being pleasant, that's interesting. I always thought mindfulness was about facing tough stuff, pushing through discomfort. What would a pleasant practice even look like?
Well, remember the jhanas, those super blissful states. Those are considered pleasant practices. It's cultivating these refined states of concentration and joy, supposedly way more intense and lasting than any regular pleasure.
So it's like trading fleeting, superficial good times for something deeper, more fulfilling.
That's the idea. And this brings us to a really fascinating passage in the text. I think you'll like this. So where were we? Yes, those quiet places. The text recommends finding a quiet place to practice mindfulness immersed in the body. But we were saying that it's more about cultivating an inner sanctuary, a state of mind, rather than an actual location.
But how do we actually do that? Like bridge that gap? How can we create that stillness when, let's face it, life is usually pretty hectic?
Well, it's a practice, Like anything else, it takes time to develop that ability to tune out the noise and really go inward.
Okay, so baby steps. What, start with 5 minutes a day, just focusing on the breath?
That's a great place to begin. And then you can gradually make those sessions longer, start applying that same awareness to other things you do throughout the day.
So it's not like mindfulness is this separate thing. It's woven into everything. Walking, eating, even washing the dishes can become practice.
Exactly. It becomes a way of being, not just something you do for a certain amount of time. And as you get more familiar with it, you'll find you can access that inner sanctuary more easily, no matter what's going on around you.
That's encouraging. It sounds like it's definitely a journey, not a destination.
Definitely a journey.
Speaking of which, I wanted to circle back to those superpowers that we were talking about earlier. Divine hearing, mind reading, past lives. It's all fascinating, but also kind of hard to wrap my brain around. What if we approach those descriptions as more like metaphors for what deep mindfulness can unlock, rather than literal superpowers?
I like that approach. So instead of thinking of them as supernatural abilities, what if we see them as potentials that emerge as practice deepens?
Potentials. Okay. So, for example, divine hearing. Maybe it's not literally hearing things from miles away, but developing a really subtle sensitivity to the energy around you, things you'd normally miss.
Exactly. You become more attuned to the nuances of your environment, the people you're with, and we start picking up on cues that most people wouldn't even notice. It's like you're tapping into a deeper level of perception.
And what about mind reading? Is it really possible to know what someone else is thinking?
Maybe not in a literal sense, but perhaps it's more about developing deep empathy and intuition. You know, those times when you just sense what someone's feeling without them having to say anything? It's like a sixth sense that allows you to connect with others on a deeper level.
We've all had those moments where we feel like we can read each other's minds. And then there's seeing past lives. Maybe there's not about literally accessing past incarnations, but about understanding how everything is interconnected. Like our present moment is shaped by countless past experiences, not just our own, but those of everyone and everything that came before. It's a vast web of cause and effect, stretching across time and space.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about recognizing that our actions have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves, influencing the present and the future. And who knows, maybe as science continues to explore the mysteries of consciousness, we'll discover that some of these abilities that seem supernatural now are actually latent potentials within us, just waiting to be unlocked.
That's a really exciting side. So even if we never learn to walk through walls or teleport, the potential for transformation is still immense.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key takeaways here. Mindfulness immersed in the body, it's not just a set of techniques or a path to superpowers. It's an invitation to explore who we really are, to discover our full potential as human beings.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We've explored this whole concept of mindfulness immersed in the body. We've learned about the 4 techniques for cultivating it, and we've even delved into some of the pretty mind-blowing potential benefits. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely feeling inspired to explore this further.
It's been an amazing conversation. And as we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with one final thought. The text mentions something called openings to higher knowledges. What do you think those openings might be, and how can we cultivate them in our own lives?
That's a really profound question. Maybe those openings are moments of heightened awareness, flashes of insight, or those times when we feel deeply connected to something bigger than ourselves. Perhaps they emerge spontaneously through practice, or maybe we need to actively seek them out. Either way, it's an invitation to approach our lives with a sense of curiosity and wonder, always open to discovering something new.
Beautifully said. And who knows, maybe as we cultivate this deep awareness of our bodies, we'll find ourselves unlocking not just those openings to higher knowledge, but also a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
That's a journey I'm definitely ready to embark on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of mindfulness immersed in the body. Until next time, happy diving, everyone.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some seriously cool Buddhist practices.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for achieving liberation. They're called Recollection of Stilling and Mindfulness of Death.
Wow.
We'll be exploring excerpts from a meditator's tools, specifically the chapters dedicated to these practices.
Okay.
So think of this deep dive as your shortcut to understanding these complex but fascinating concepts. We'll pull out the most compelling points and offer some fresh perspectives. What do you think?
Sound good? Sounds great.
All right, to kick things off, let's talk about recollection of stilling.
Okay.
Now, the core idea here is to achieve true inner peace and freedom.
Right.
By completely uprooting greed, malice, and ignorance from our minds. I can already feel my stress levels decreasing just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a profound concept.
It is.
And MN 140 really drives this home with a powerful metaphor. It compares abandoning these unwholesome roots to uprooting a palm tree.
Okay.
Signifying, complete eradication, leaving no chance for them to sprout again.
So no more mental weeds.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. It makes so much sense. But how do we actually go about uprooting these deeply ingrained mental habits?
Right.
AN 9.36 mentions something called the first jhana as being key to ending these mental effluents. What exactly does that mean?
So the jhanas are states of deep meditative absorption.
Okay.
Imagine being so engrossed in something that all the usual mental chatter just fades away.
Oh, okay.
That sense of focused calm where your mind feels crystal clear, that's a taste of jhana. And each jhana progressively refines your awareness and detaches your mind from like sensory distractions.
Oh, okay, so it's not just about zoning out. It's about actively engaging with your mind in a specific way to cultivate deep focus and clarity.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
And as you repeatedly engage with the jhanas, you cultivate greater mental mastery,
Oh, okay.
eventually reaching a point where you can completely transcend the cycle of suffering.
Wow.
Think of it like an archer practicing on a straw man.
Okay.
With repeated practice, they become incredibly skilled at hitting the target. Eventually, they're able to shoot, long distances and pierce even great masses. Similarly, by repeatedly engaging with jhana, you train your mind to reach the ultimate target, liberation.
That's a great analogy, but the book also mentions something called the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception.
Right.
That sounds a bit mind-boggling, to be honest.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult to grasp intellectually.
Okay.
Think of it like trying to explain the taste of chocolate to someone who's never had it before.
Okay, yeah.
You could describe it using words, but the true understanding comes from direct experience.
So you're saying the best way to understand this dimension is to actually experience it through meditation.
Precisely.
Okay.
The Buddha himself said that these advanced states are best understood through direct meditative experience.
Fair enough. I'm intrigued to learn more, but perhaps we should move on for now. One passage from ID 90 really stood out to me. It claims that dispassion is the supreme quality and those who cultivate it reap supreme rewards. That makes me think about how often I get caught up in clinging to like I and mine. Do you ever struggle with that?
Absolutely. Cultivating dispassion is key because it directly addresses the root cause of suffering, craving.
Right.
When we are free from craving, we're no longer bound by the endless cycle of seeking pleasure and avoid other thing.
Okay.
And you are right to connect this to the idea of construing, as mentioned in MN 140.
Right.
That passage equates clinging, which it calls construing with disease and suffering. True peace comes from letting go of these limiting constructs.
So dispassion is kind of like the ultimate mental detox.
Exactly.
And the reward for this deep cleansing is something truly incredible. UD 8.1 describes this sublime state, a dimension beyond all worldly constructs where suffering completely ceases to exist.
It's a dimension that transcends our usual conceptions of space, consciousness, and nothingness.
Wow.
A state of pure, unconditioned peace where there's no coming, going, staying, or passing away.
Wow. UD 8.2 really captures this beautifully. It emphasizes that craving can only be pierced by direct knowing, leading to a state of profound emptiness for the one who sees.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
It highlights that liberation isn't about adding something new to our experience, but rather removing the veil of ignorance that obscures the true nature of reality.
It's like finally seeing the world without any filters. Speaking of seeing clearly, UD 8.3 talks about the unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated. What do you make of that?
It suggests that liberation isn't about creating something new, but realizing what has always been, that our true nature is already free from suffering.
That's a really comforting thought, and UD 8.4 builds on this, stating that true freedom comes from inner independence, a state of unshakable calm that dissolves desire and breaks the cycle of rebirth.
Exactly, and MN 140 sheds light on how we can cultivate this inner independence. It encourages us to let go of clinging to I and mine. The more we identify with these fleeting concepts, the more we suffer.
So the key to lasting happiness is to detach from these limiting constructs of self and embrace the freedom that comes from recognizing our true nature.
It's a process of letting go and realizing that we are not our thoughts, emotions, or experiences.
It reminds me of the verses from DHP 202-203, which liken passion to fire and emphasize that no bliss surpasses the peace attained through understanding the true nature of reality.
Absolutely. When we truly understand that everything is impermanent, interconnected, and ultimately empty of inherent self, we can finally find lasting peace and fulfillment.
It sounds like Recollection of Stilling is all about cultivating this deep understanding through meditation and mindful awareness.
Yes.
But now I'm curious about mindfulness of death, a practice that sounds a bit paradoxical, to be honest.
It does seem paradoxical, doesn't it? But stay tuned, because next we'll explore how this seemingly morbid practice can actually enhance life.
I'm all ears.
So we were just talking about mindfulness of death. Like, it's not about dwelling on death in a morbid way,
Right.
but rather using it as a skillful tool to cultivate a sense of urgency
Okay.
and prioritize what truly matters.
That makes sense. It's kind of like a wake-up call to appreciate like the preciousness of life and not waste it on things that ultimately don't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And AN 5.57 highlights this beautifully.
Okay.
It explains how contemplating the universality of death can help weaken our attachment to fleeting pleasures and motivate us towards the liberating path.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how your own perspective shifts when you become aware of your own mortality?
Definitely. Like when I hear about someone my age passing away, it makes me stop and reevaluate my own priorities. It's a stark reminder that our time here is limited.
It's a powerful reminder to make the most of each moment.
Right.
And speaking of making the most of our time,
Yeah.
𝙀𝙖𝙖𝙞 6.19 offers a fascinating anecdote about two groups of monks.
Okay.
One group was fixated on clinging to life, while the other saw each breath as a precious opportunity for spiritual progress.
Okay, that reminds me of something. I read an article recently about a study on people facing terminal illness. The ones who focused on finding meaning and connection, despite their prognosis, actually reported a higher quality of life
Right.
than those who just focused on extending their lifespan.
That's a great example of how our mindset and approach to death can have a profound impact on our experience of life.
Right.
And it ties back to that concept of construing we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
The monks who clung to life were essentially construing their existence as something separate and permanent.
Right, and that kind of clinging just leads to more suffering because it's based on an illusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And 𝙀𝙖𝙖𝙞 6.20 offers some incredibly detailed instructions for cultivating mindfulness of death.
Okay.
The Buddha guides us to reflect on potential causes of death to help identify and abandon any remaining unskillful qualities. It's like using the awareness of death as a motivator for personal growth.
So it's not about being afraid of death,
Right.
but rather using that awareness to inspire us to live more ethically and make the most of each day.
Precisely. And SN 3.25 contains a truly captivating dialogue between the Buddha and King Pasenadi
Okay.
that illustrates this point beautifully. Even with all his worldly power and resources, the king is utterly helpless in the face of death.
It's a humbling reminder that no amount of wealth or status can protect us from the inevitability of death.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in that dialogue, only Dhamma practice offers true refuge.
That makes me think about how often we place our sense of security in external things that are ultimately impermanent.
It's a common trap, but the good news is that we have the power to shift our focus inward, to cultivate qualities like wisdom and compassion that provide true and lasting refuge.
That leads perfectly into the verses that follow in SN 3.25. They're incredibly powerful, using vivid imagery to liken aging and death to unstoppable mountains, crushing everything in their path.
It's a stark reminder of the urgency of seeking true refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha.
Right.
Not refuge in the sense of escaping from life, but rather finding a solid foundation of wisdom and compassion to navigate the inevitable ups and downs.
And amidst all this talk about death and impermanence, MN 131 offers some really beautiful and practical advice. It encourages us to focus on living fully in the present moment, as tomorrow is uncertain.
It's a reminder to embrace life fully, with a sense of gratitude and appreciation for every moment, rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
That resonates so deeply with me.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in our plans and anxieties.
Right.
But ultimately, all we have is this present moment.
And that's where the true potential for joy and liberation lies. AN 4.184 portrays an individual who has eradicated clinging and achieved a deep understanding of the Dhamma.
Okay.
Even in the face of death, they remain free from fear and despair.
Wow, that's inspiring to think that it's possible to reach a state of such profound inner peace and fearlessness.
It is possible, and these practices are the tools that can help us get there. Now remember that intriguing metaphor in SN 44.9.
Yeah.
The one comparing the sustenance of a flame carried by the wind to the craving that fuels rebirth.
Oh, yeah, that really stuck with me. It's like if we want true freedom, we need to figure out what cravings are fueling our own personal fire.
Exactly.
Okay.
By recognizing and uprooting craving, we can break free from the cycle of suffering and attain true liberation.
Right.
And both recollection of stilling and mindfulness of death are powerful practices for doing just that.
So they work together to help us identify and extinguish the flames of craving that keep us bound to suffering.
Precisely.
Okay.
They're like two sides of the same coin, both leading us towards a state of profound inner freedom.
It's incredible to think that these ancient practices can be so relevant to our lives today.
They are timeless wisdom teachings, offering guidance and support on our journey towards greater peace and fulfillment.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a renewed sense of inspiration to delve deeper into these practices.
Me too. And you know what's really fascinating?
What?
Is how these practices also influence our perception of the world around us. Remember Maharaj's question to the Buddha
Oh, yeah.
about how to avoid being seen by the king of death?
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. What was the Buddha's answer again?
The Buddha's advice was to view the world as empty, always mindful to have removed any view about self. By doing so, one transcends death's grasp.
It's about recognizing the impermanence and interconnectedness of all things,
Yes.
including ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay.
When we let go of our clinging to a fixed sense of self, we become liberated from the fear of death. It's like the fear loses its grip when there's no self to cling to life. And this ties back beautifully to the concept of recollection of stilling.
It's like both practices are encouraging us to let go of clinging, whether it's to our sense of self, our desires, or our aversions.
Exactly. And remember, this freedom isn't some distant goal to be achieved in the future. It's available to us right here, right now, in the present moment.
Yeah, it's amazing how these practices offer such a different way of looking at life and death. It's not about escaping or fearing, but understanding and embracing.
It's a profound shift in perspective. And AN 9.36 really highlights how transformative this shift can be through the power of the jhanas. Remember our archer analogy?
Totally. The more we practice, the more skilled we become at hitting the target of liberation.
Exactly. By repeatedly engaging with the jhanas, we train our minds to become more focused, stable, and less reactive to the ups and downs of life.
And as we progress through the jhanas, we shed those layers of clinging and maybe even get a glimpse of that dimension of neither perception nor non-perception.
Right. And even if we don't reach those advanced states, simply engaging with the jhanas can have a huge impact on our daily lives. It's like training for a marathon. Even if we don't finish the race, we'll be in much better shape than when we started.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've got recollection of stilling, working on quieting the mind, and cultivating deep focus. How does mindfulness of death fit into this picture?
Where AN 6.20 offers some really practical guidance for cultivating mindfulness of death. It encourages us to regularly reflect on potential causes of death as a way to identify and abandon any remaining unskillful qualities. It's like using the awareness of death as a motivator to clean up our mental house, so to speak.
It's like if we knew we only had a limited time left, what would we want to change about ourselves? What kind of legacy would we want to leave behind?
Exactly. By recognizing the potential for death at any moment, we're inspired to live more ethically, cultivate positive qualities, and make the most of our time. And AN 6.9 reminds us to approach this practice with a sense of urgency. The monks who were most successful saw each breath as a precious opportunity for progress, rather than clinging to the hope of living a long life.
So it's not about obsessing over death, but rather using it as a reminder to truly live in the present moment.
Exactly. And remember King Pasenadi's story from SN 3.25. Despite all his wealth and power, he was ultimately helpless in the face of death.
It's a powerful reminder that true security and happiness can't be found in external circumstances, but come from cultivating inner peace and wisdom. And in that dialogue, the Buddha emphasizes that only Dhamma practice offers true refuge.
And those qualities not only benefit us, but also ripple outward and positively impact those around us.
So it's not about escaping from the world, but rather engaging with it in a more skillful and compassionate way.
That's a powerful shift in perspective, and it really highlights the transformative potential of these practices. They're not just about retreating into a cave and meditating. They're about bringing the fruits of that meditation into our daily lives.
And using those fruits to create a more peaceful, just, and compassionate world.
Exactly. So as you continue to reflect on these practices, think about how you can apply them not only for your personal growth, but also for the benefit of others.
That's a wonderful challenge to leave our listeners with, to ponder how these ancient practices can guide us toward a more meaningful and fulfilling life, both for ourselves and for all beings.
Indeed. May we all find the wisdom and courage to embark on this journey of liberation together.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of these incredibly rich and transformative practices.
There's always more to explore. But for now, perhaps the most important takeaway is simply to remember the power of these practices and the potential they hold for each of us to cultivate inner peace, to face life's challenges with wisdom and courage, and to live with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning.
Beautifully said. And remember, the journey towards liberation isn't about achieving some distant goal, but rather about transforming our relationship with each present moment.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, that wraps up another deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.